These are the top 10 most hated characters in One Piece, as voted by over 7,000 members of the Grand Fleet. And look, this isn't your average fictional pirate poll either, because I conducted a pre-poll to ascertain the most hated characters in the series. I then took the top 15 responses and threw them into a ranked choice voting poll, which means that all of the pollees were asked to rank their most hated characters in order from most to least hated, with the 10th most hated character in One Piece being deemed as Scratchman Apu. And really, look, the dude has Pooh in his name, so I feel like he was always destined for this level of infamy. Scratchman Apu is he's a love him or hate him kind of character, and people are generally more on the hating him side, because he's relentlessly loud, grating, obnoxious, weird, and just has questionable taste in music. Now, for people who enjoy the idea of musically fiddling with their bodily instruments, then yes, Apu is a strong candidate for favorite character, but in my experience, for a lot of the fanbase, he doesn't land particularly well. He's also a filthy traitor, so that's a problem. Although personally, I wouldn't say I hate him. He's definitely much more annoying in the anime though, because I can actually hear him, and at least when reading the manga, my imagination can tone him down a bit and substitute his music for something that I enjoy a bit more. But Scratchman Apu had an incredibly even distribution across rank choice, and in his defense, he never got super high points in any individual section. Only 3.18% of all voters put him as their number one most hated, which is only 235 people. However, the passion of those 235 people cannot be underestimated. I cannot overstate my appreciation of Scratchman Apu's inclusion on this list of most hate characters. Thanks for reminding me of Scratchman Apu. I absolutely despise him. Number one it is. Scratchman Apu is my most hated. I always felt like he never should have existed in the first place. I don't know why Apu was even on the list, but he will remain at number one because I am just blatantly racist. That last comment there was probably written by a member of the Long Leg tribe. They and the Long Arm tribe have a millennia of bad blood between them, which was recently bridged with the alliance of Blue Gilly and Ideo. However, the hate is still out there, and for whatever reason, racism included, Scratchman Apu is the 10th most hated character in all of One Piece. But compared to what we have coming up, Scratchman Apu doesn't even qualify as a hate entree. He's more like a very poorly constructed hate hors d'oeuvre, with the 9th most hated character pretty immediately eclipsing him because it is Absalom. I think that Absalom is a pretty easy one to despise and a rare strikeout by Oda when it comes to character creation, because he's the guy who takes the pervy quirk way over the line, like when he licked Nico Robin and forced Nami against a wall in the shower. I personally don't like Absalom because I just can't get on board with his character quirk, and that's problematic because that quirk is pretty much all there is to him. So if you don't like it, then you don't like him. Everything about Absalom in Thriller Bark either has a sexual or romantic end goal, and putting the moral issues aside, it's just kinda boring that there's nothing more to him than that. Although in Japanese, Absalom, he does have a little bit more weirdness because he often seems to refer to himself in the plural. He says lines like, "You will become our bride," which is weird because he's only referring to himself. So I don't know, there's this big mess happening with Absalom, and One Piece fans en masse want very little to do with it, with the general opinion of him being summed up as the following: Absalom for obvious reasons, which might actually make you wonder how he only ended up in 9th place, and I think the answer to that is because there are characters who are fun to hate, fun to watch get beat up, or do hateful things for an extremely relevant in-world agenda, and Absalom is none of these. And for all of these reasons, Absalom became an example of a character who was very easy to kill off, which is not easy to do in One Piece. Oda took care of Absalom off-screen, gave his devil fruit to someone else, and I think the series is probably better off without him. Although I have to say there was just a little bit of potential with Absalom, because Oda did draw an image of him as a child, where he apparently grew up as a gravedigger, and had this vaguely defined dream of becoming the Graveyard King, but that just makes it all the more frustrating that this was never explored in favor of him being a sex pest. And I think the word pest also accurately describes the 8th most hated character, Charlotte Flampe, who was first introduced in chapter 891, and she became one of the most hated characters in One Piece in chapter 892 after she sabotaged the battle between Luffy and Katakuri. So let me tell you, at the time, Flampe was unquestionably the most hated character in all of, not even One Piece, just media in general. As soon as she did this, mate, weekly readers took this interruption very personally. And it really did take a couple of years for the heat around Flampe to die down. And given that she's still number 8 on this list, it looks like that oven never quite got turned off. For me, I definitely wouldn't say I hate Flampe. It's a bit difficult to hate the character responsible for giving Katakuri such a fantastic moment of stabbing himself and really taking that big step of character development, which would end in mutual respect for Luffy. Although I will say that Flampe is a bit tropey for my taste. You don't often see One Piece going into the really generic anime archetypes, but Flampe fits the obsessive little sister trope a little bit too perfectly. One interesting fact about Flampe is that she had the highest percentage of people put her in last place. So amongst this group, she is statistically the most least hated. And I think that's because Flampe is hateable for all of the right reasons. Oda engineered her to tank outrage rather than Absalom, who was engineered to be funny. So in that way, I really appreciate Flampe because she did exactly what she was supposed to do. And that even gives her some appeal to certain voters. Flampe is a bit too close to my type to hate. That type being a brat with a literal bubble butt, I suppose. Although, controversially, it did eventually come out that Flampe chooses to dress herself in a balloon. That is not her actual butt. Because there's an image of her from One Piece Treasure Cruise, and as it turns out, she's just a normal girl who chooses to embubble herself. But right above this brat in 7th place is the loathsome magma daddy that is Sakazuki. Now, Sakazuki is the first character here who actually has a genuinely strong positive fanbase. Honestly, I like Sakazuki. He's a really good character. My boy Sakazuki did nothing wrong. Ace had his freedom and he threw it away. Ace chose donut. And recently there's also been a developing movement of people who feel actively bad for Sakazuki because they see his frustration dealing with the world government, and despite his extreme views, he's definitely not on the same level of evil as the world nobles or the Five Elders, and in fact, compared to them, he's practically a protagonist. So there is a lot of appreciation for him, which means that those who do hate him have to hate him that much harder for him to have landed here. And I also feel like you can both hate and appreciate him, which I guess we'll call appreciating, and it's mainly for the following. Akainu is my most hated, not for what he did to Ace, but for what he did in Ohara. I'd like it noted that this comment is spelled Ohara with an apostrophe, thus making it sound like a very Irish island. And rest assured, this St. Patrick's Day, I will personally be pouring one out for the memory of Ohara. I think this commenter makes a great point though. I've never really disliked Sakazuki for what he did to Ace, because I've always held the belief that Ace, he very much did that to himself. Sakazuki was just doing his job. Every Marine on that island would have killed Ace because that was the whole point. He was supposed to be executed, and Sakazuki turned out to be the only one who could actually get the job done. But Ohara is a different matter. Executing a criminal for crimes, even if he's our main character's brother, is one thing, but coldly ordering a genocide on an entire civilization for the sake of justice is another. And that's why Sakazuki very much deserves his place on this list. As does our 6th most hated character, Vander Decken. I just despise the creep that is Vander Decken. My most hated character is Vander Decken because I used to know someone like him. Vander Decken goes straight to the top for me. Dude literally wanted to marry a child. So that is 100% true. 10 years ago, Vander Decken saw a 6-year-old mermaid and decided to dedicate his whole life to marrying her, as well as attaining all of the assorted benefits that come with marriage, which aren't, all sexual. He also wanted Shirahoshi's wealth, fame, and power. And look, to be as charitable as I can be to Vander Decken, he didn't choose Shirahoshi at random. After discovering that she had the power of Poseidon, he wanted to claim that power for himself. And it's implied that the Vander Decken line has history with this particular ancient weapon. The truth of the legend is a secret that belongs to my family alone, I think. I don't know why he added the I think to the end there, but that's actually really interesting because this is Vander Decken IX. So there is a long line of history with this character that we will probably sadly never dive into. So he has family issues with weapon, and his plan was actually to try and aid Shirahoshi up with the contents of the Tamate box. That is being as charitable as I can. To be as realistic as I can, he also spent 10 years declaring his genuine love for a child, calling her a real beauty at the age of 6, stated that he, quote, likes big women, and often mentally pictures her in very suggestive poses. So all in all, just under 45% of all voters had Vander Decken in their top 5 most hated characters, and I think that's a pretty good reason. And yet, there are still 5 magnificent specimens who managed to outdo this child predator. And for our 5th most hated character, we need to go back in time. Ooh. Because 41 years ago, a great mistake was made when Spandam and his wife, who we're going to call Spandina, gave birth to their child Spandam, assumedly through Spandina's spangina. Spandam easy. Spandam, no question. Spandam's gotta be number 1. Something interesting I noticed is that much more so than any other character, people really didn't feel a need to justify hating Spandam. With everyone else, it's like Flampe because of all of the weird shit she did, or Absalom because of all of that he did. But with Spandam, there is this innate, unspoken understanding of hatred. In fact, the most detailed comment we got was the following. Spandam, hate him cause what he did to Robin. And he did do some horrible things to Robin. He slapped her, dragged her by the hair, slammed her face into the stone floor, and just kept physically and mentally mentally abusing her at seemingly every moment he could, right up until Sogeking finally got rid of him. He also has the entitled brat thing going on. Spandam is of course the subject of nepotism, and he only has his position because Daddy Spandine was a big cypherpole dude guy back in the day. So he's even more hateable because there is nothing earned about his position. At least with someone like Sakazuki, he can back up his dickery with a show of power, but Spandam has absolutely nothing behind him. And that's why he has to make himself feel better by repeatedly hitting a defenseless woman. But it's not just about what he did to Robin. It's also about what he did to Tom as well. Most people remember Spandam as the guy who brutalized Robin during any slobby, but he was also the one who used the Battle Frankies to attack Water 7 and ended up getting Tom arrested and executed. And you know, it really says something when Rob Lucci, a cold-hearted mass murderer, is infinitely more liked than Spandam. I think that even if Rob Lucci had successfully killed Robin, that Spandam would probably still be more disliked within the fanbase. But probably not more disliked than our 4th place finisher, Saint J. Garcia Saturn. Alright, so this might be recency bias, but I think that J. Garcia Saturn might be my personal most hated character at this moment. The way he systematically tortured and dismantled Bartholomew Kuma is on a whole different level to anything anyone else on this list has ever accomplished. He experimented on Ginny, and then the way he made sure that Kuma was literally and mentally ripped apart piece by piece, it is all just Saint Saturn is the closest thing we've had to the idea of pure evil, and it makes him one of the more compelling antagonists to me, because he's able to achieve so much, and I 1,000,000% loathe him, but for all of the right reasons. I am so supremely invested in causing him as much pain and suffering as possible, which I'm not so much in cases like Flampe and Scratchman Apu. For the most part, I just want them to go away, but not Saturn. I will not allow him to exit quietly into the night. I should say that Saturn does have a pretty decent level of respect happening here as well, because if you look at his voting stats, the curve forms a valley. So you have a lot of people at the top of the rankings who really hate him, and a lot of people at the bottom who really don't, or at least not as much as the other 14 people, and then not a whole lot happening in the middle. However, the hate at the top is so potent that it has earned Saturn 4th place, but now we are going to move on to the big 3 of hated characters in One Piece, starting with the bronze medal Trebol. And look, when you create a character who deliberately chooses to coat himself in snot, then I think you should be prepared for him to be one of the top 3 most hated in the series. Trebol is disgusting. Trebol made me take a break from One Piece, Trebol without a doubt. But it may have just been the English dub that ruined him for me. So weirdly enough, Trebol's voice in the English dub is almost exactly the same as it is in Japanese. In both cases, it sounds like but Trebol has the same kind of issue as Absalom and Vander Decken, not so much in the sexual harassment kind of way, but in the no decent payoff kind of way. All 3 of them are secondary villains in their own arc that are mostly reduced to the one annoying quirk they have. I never really remember Trebol for anything he did, just that he was also there, which is not a good enough legacy to have for someone so disgusting and annoying. Unlike our silver medal winner Kurozumi Orochi, who is one of only 2 characters who got over 1,000 votes for the number 1 rank, which should tell you just how stacked our ultimate winner is, because my god, the winner got so many first place votes. But Orochi is certainly pulling his weight in the realm of hatred. I'm sure most can relate. Orochi boils my blood. It's a close battle between Akainu and Orochi, but I'll have 2-2 with Orochi. 2-2. My number 1 will always go to Orochi. No matter who else shows up, I'm always gonna hate him. Orochi is like a mega Spandam, a coward who hides behind a greater power with a frankly hideous design that ends up being perfectly reflective of his hideous inner personality. He's responsible for more horrors than I have time to list, but a pretty memorable one would be feeding all of those smile fruits to an entire town and ruining all of their lives for the sake of an afternoon lol. He's also he's a vat of wasted potential. Orochi is one of the craziest devil fruits in the series, but he isn't capable of utilizing it beyond a party trick. He also shows a lot of genuine tactical and intellectual promise, but all of his ideas end up sucking. He also has a legitimately tragic past, being an innocent victim of his family's purge, but that never really goes anywhere, and he ends his run as another flat One Piece villain. Although if we're being completely honest, I think that Orochi's biggest crime is not being good looking, which I would argue is the same for most characters on this list. If Orochi had a Doflamingo-esque design, then this fanbase would be infested with Orochi simps, and I would wager the same for any other aesthetically challenged character on this list, including many of our honorable question mark mentions, because rounding out the top 15 in this order were Foxy, Vinsmoke Judge, Stelly, Ganjiro, and Wapol, with the only redeemable design of the bunch being Ganjiro. I'm quite proud that Foxy didn't make it into the top 10 because I don't... I'm quite proud that Foxy didn't make it into the top 10 because I don't think he deserves it. I will forever remain a Foxy supremacist. But by now, I imagine that you may have guessed who the most hated character in One Piece is. And the gold medal, of course, goes to Saint Charlos, who received by far the most amount of first place votes. In fact, almost a third of everyone who participated in this poll had Saint Charlos smack bang in the #1 most hated position. So much so that if these characters were multinational corporations, then we'd have to start lobbying to break up Charlos's monopoly on hate. But the best thing about Charlos is that he's a character who we can take out our frustrations on. As bad as he is, we've gotten to see Charlos get the crap beat out of him on 3 separate occasions now, and it is glorious each and every time. Which is why I have a bit of a soft spot for him, because I know that as awful as he is, and it's pretty awful, but all of that aside, I know that someone is imminently going to rip him a new butthole. But those are the top 10 most hated characters in all of One Piece as dictated by you, the Grand Fleet. And if you want the chance to participate in future videos, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel, which also grants consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed.